Hey everyone, and welcome to English with Narayana. I'm so excited for today's deep dive because we're talking about something really fun, learning English from movies and TV shows.
It is a fun way to learn. And it really can help you sound more natural when you speak English.
It's true, because textbook English can be a little stiff sometimes, right? Like, when was the last time you heard someone say, "Good morning, how do you do?" in a casual conversation?
Right, like nobody really talks like that. Movies and shows use language the way people actually speak,
For sure. And I think so many people, when they're learning English, they get stuck in that textbook world. But to really improve your speaking, you need to hear how native speakers use the language every single day in everyday situations.
And I think it's a good way to think of it like, textbooks, they're really good for teaching you the grammar rules. Of course, those are important. But watching movies and shows, it's more like listening to music. You start to understand the rhythm and the flow of the language, how words are connected, and how just changing your intonation can completely change what you mean.
So is it kind of like learning the notes on a piano versus like actually playing a song?
Exactly. And just like, listening to all different kinds of music can help you broaden your musical taste. Watching different types of movies and shows can help you learn a whole bunch of new vocabulary and different ways that people speak.
I love that. Okay, so that all makes total sense. But let's break it down a little bit more.
Yeah.
What are some specific benefits of learning English this way?
I'd say one of the hugest benefits is that you'll pick up on real-life expressions, slang, and idioms that you won't find in your typical textbook. Like if you hear someone say, "I'm down for that," it means "I agree" or "I'm interested." You're not going to see that in a textbook.
Right. Oh, that's a good one. And you know what? I remember the first time I heard someone say, "I'm good," when they were offered something, I was so confused because in my textbook, good only meant not bad, not no thank you.
Exactly. That's a perfect example. It's all about the context and how we actually use these words.
Yeah.
And movies and shows give you that context. They show you how people use these expressions in different situations with different tones of voice and even body language, which helps you understand what they really mean.
So it's not just about learning new words. It's about understanding how to use them correctly in different situations. What about listening skills? How can movies and shows help us with that?
Well, think about it. When you're watching a movie, you're hearing all different types of accents, different speeds of speech, people even mumbling, and your ears have to really work hard to try to understand everything that's being said.
Oh, it's true. And sometimes I even have to rewind a scene just to catch what a character is saying because they're talking so fast, or maybe they have a really strong accent.
And that's a good thing. It's like a workout for your ears. The more you listen to these different variations in English, the better your listening comprehension is going to get. You'll start to pick up on those subtle cues like intonation and stress that completely change the meaning of a sentence.
It's almost like learning to decipher a secret code.
Totally.
Yeah.
And as you get better at understanding different accents and speaking styles, you're just going to naturally feel more confident in your own ability to communicate in English.
This is all making so much sense. So we've talked about real-life expressions and improving our listening skills. What else is there?
Let's see. Well, something that I think a lot of people don't realize is how important it is for cultural understanding. Because language, it's not just words. It reflects a culture's values, their humor, their social norms. And you can really learn a lot about a culture by watching how characters interact in movies and TV shows.
Can you give me an example of that?
Sure. So let's say you're watching a sitcom, like Friends, right? You're not only going to learn common phrases and slang, but you'll also get a sense of American humor and those social cues. You'll see how friends interact with each other, how they express their emotions, and just how they deal with everyday situations.
So it's almost like getting a glimpse into a different culture from your own couch.
Precisely. And that cultural understanding can be super valuable, especially if you're planning to travel to an English-speaking country or if you want to interact more with native English speakers. It'll help you avoid misunderstandings and help you connect with people at a much deeper level.
I love that. Okay, so we've talked about real-life expressions, listening skills, and cultural understanding. Is there anything else we should add to that list of benefits?
Oh, for sure. How can we forget about pronunciation and intonation? Movies and TV shows give you a chance to hear how native speakers pronounce words, where they put the stress in a sentence, and how their voices go up and down to express different emotions.
That's true. It's like having a pronunciation coach right there in your living room.
Exactly. And you can pause, rewind, listen to a phrase over and over again until you feel comfortable saying it yourself. It's a great way to work on your accent and make your English sound so much more natural.
Yeah, I've definitely done that before. It feels a little silly at first, but it really does help. And the best part is you're doing all of this while you're being entertained, It doesn't feel like studying at all.
Exactly. Learning should be fun, and that's one of the biggest advantages of using movies and TV shows to improve your English. It's a totally natural and enjoyable way to learn.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've covered the why. Now I'm sure our listeners are wondering, okay, but how? Like, how can we actually make the most of this approach? But before we dive into that, let's take a closer look at some of those real-life American English phrases that we talked about earlier.
Yes. There's a whole world of expressions out there that you just won't find in those textbooks. Let's start with I'm good. I mean, we talked about it earlier, but it's just a really great example of how one phrase can have so many different meanings depending on, how you use it.
Yeah, it's definitely one that really tripped me up when I was first learning English. I remember thinking, wait, but I just asked you how you are. Why are you telling me you're good?
It's funny how those little things can be so confusing when you're first learning English. So, okay, if someone asks you, how are you? And you say, I'm good, just means I'm doing well. But if someone's offering you something like a second slice of pizza or another piece of cake, and you say, I'm good, it means no thank you.
Oh, I see. It's like this secret code that you have to crack.
Exactly. What about freaking out? I bet you've heard that one a lot.
Oh, yeah, all the time. But it seems like it can be a good thing or a bad thing.
That's a great observation. It's definitely a very versatile phrase. It can express excitement like, oh my gosh, I'm freaking out. I just won the lottery. But it can also express fear or anxiety like, I'm totally freaking out about this exam tomorrow.
So how do you know which one it is? How do you know if they're happy or scared?
Context clues. You really have to pay attention to the situation, the person's tone of voice, and even their body language will give you hints.
So it's like you're a detective and you're trying to solve the mystery of what they really mean.
Yeah. That's a great way to think about it. What about cut it out? That one's kind of tricky too.
Cut it out. Yeah, that is a weird one.
It can be playful or serious.
Yeah.
So, if you're joking around with a friend and they're teasing you, you might say, cut it out, with a laugh. But then if someone's being rude or disrespectful, you can also say, cut it out, in a more serious tone to get them to stop.
So once again, it all comes back to that context.
Right. And these are just a few quick examples of why it's so helpful to learn English from movies and TV shows, because you're actually seeing and hearing how native speakers use these phrases in real life, which helps you understand what they really mean and how to use them yourself.
It's like a crash course in real-world English. I love it.
Oh.
Okay, so we've explored the why, and we've looked at a bunch of interesting phrases. Now let's finally dive into the how. So how can our listeners learn effectively from movies and TV shows? What are your tips?
That is the big question, right? So I think one of the best things you can do is to use subtitles.
Subtitles. Okay, so should we use them or not? I remember when I first started learning English, I always felt like I was cheating if I used subtitles. But I have to admit, they were really helpful.
Yeah, there's absolutely no shame in using subtitles. They can be incredibly helpful, especially when you're just starting out, because they help you connect the spoken words with the written form, and that can really help you improve your spelling and even learn new vocabulary. And they're also super useful for, if someone has a strong accent that's hard to understand, or if the dialogue is just really fast.
Yeah, that makes sense. So should we always use subtitles then, or is there a time to wean ourselves off of them?
So it's a good idea to start with subtitles, but as you get more comfortable, challenge yourself to try turning them off for, maybe just a few minutes and see how much you can understand without them. It's kind of like taking the training wheels off of a bike. It might be a little scary at first, but it's going to help you build confidence and independence.
I love that analogy. So it's all about gradually pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone. Okay, what about repeating and imitating? I've heard that's a good technique for working on your pronunciation.
It's one of the most effective techniques. So if you hear a phrase that you like, or maybe one that you're struggling with, pause the show and try to repeat it out loud. You can even mimic the actor's pronunciation, their intonation. And if you want to go all out, you can copy their facial expressions too. It might feel a little silly at first, but trust me, it works.
Yeah, I have to admit, it does feel a bit silly to be talking to my TV.
Yeah.
But I've noticed that if I do that, it really helps those phrases and words stick in my memory.
Exactly. And that's because you're actively engaging with the language. You're not just passively listening, You're actually using your muscles to make those sounds, which strengthens those neural pathways in your brain and helps you remember things better.
So it's like a workout for your mouth and for your brain.
Yeah, it's like a 2-for-1 deal. Okay, now what about note-taking? Do you think it's helpful to write down new words and phrases?
I think it's a really good idea. What do you think?
Oh, I completely agree. Don't just let those amazing new expressions fly by. Write them down in a notebook or use flashcards or even just type them into your phone. I know a lot of people use language learning apps now too, whatever works for you. But writing things down is super helpful for your memory. And then later on, you have a list that you can go back to and review everything you've learned.
I love that. I actually keep a little notebook where I write down all the fun phrases and quotes that I hear in movies and TV shows. It's kind of like my own personal phrase book.
That's such a great idea. It's all about finding what works best for you and, making the learning process fun. And here's another tip. Don't be afraid to experiment with different genres.
Oh, different genres. How does that help?
Well, if you think about it, comedies are great for learning slang and humorous expressions, while dramas will expose you to more formal language and how people talk about their feelings. Action movies can teach you those short, urgent phrases, and documentaries can help you learn tons of new vocabulary about specific topics.
It's like cross-training for your English skills.
I like that. That's a great way to put it. By watching lots of different types of movies and TV shows, you're going to hear a much wider range of vocabulary and different ways that people speak. It's going to make you a more well-rounded English speaker, and you'll just feel more confident overall.
Okay, so I've got subtitles, repeating note-taking, and watching lots of different genres. Is there anything else we should add to our English learning toolkit?
Oh, let me think. Don't be afraid to rewind and rewatch scenes that are maybe a little challenging for you, or even scenes that you just really enjoy. Sometimes you need to hear something a few times before you really grasp it, especially if people are talking fast or using a lot of slang.
That's so true. And sometimes you just want to rewatch a scene because it's so funny.
Exactly. Learning a language should be fun. And there's no rule saying you can't watch your favorite scenes multiple times. In fact, the more you enjoy the process, the more likely you are to keep going and the faster you're going to see results.
So we've talked about the why and the how. Now let's get to the good stuff. What are your top recommendations for movies and TV shows that are great for English learners?
Okay, let's dive into that fun world. So our source material mentioned a bunch of popular shows like Friends, The Office, and Stranger Things. Friends is a classic for a reason.
Right.
It's super relatable, and the dialogue's pretty easy to understand.
Yeah, I have to agree. Friends is a great one.
Right. It's just a really fun way to learn those everyday expressions and slang, and also to get a feel for how friends interact with each other in an American setting. The Office is hilarious, but it does have a lot of workplace humor and sarcasm, which could be a bit tricky for beginners.
Yeah, The Office is definitely one to watch once you've kind of got a good grasp of the basics, I think.
For sure. And Stranger Things is really interesting because it's got that kind of mix of, casual teenage slang, but also more dramatic and spooky language.
Yeah, and it has a super captivating storyline that just keeps you coming back for more. Okay, so what about other genres? Any suggestions for people who love romantic comedies?
You know what? Something like Love Actually would be perfect. It's full of witty banter and heartwarming conversations. And if you're into mysteries, you could try a classic like Sherlock, or even a more modern detective series.
Awesome. Those are some really good suggestions. And I think it's important to say that, these are just starting points.
Absolutely. The most important thing is to find movies and shows that you genuinely enjoy watching.
Yeah, because when you're having fun learning English, it doesn't even feel like work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There are so many to choose from. I mean, you really can't go wrong.
Yeah, and you know what? Don't feel like you have to understand every single word to get something out of it. Even if you only pick up on a few new phrases or you just start to get a better feel for how English is spoken, you're still making progress.
Oh, for sure. And it's easy to get overwhelmed when you're learning a new language, but it's so important to celebrate those little wins.
I agree. Every little step counts, know. And actually, before we wrap up, I do want to share one last tip that I think can really help.
Oh, okay. I'm all ears. Okay, so you know how we were talking about finding shows that you enjoy? Well, take that one step further and pick a show or a movie that you've actually already seen, but in your native language.
Oh, that's interesting. Why do you recommend that?
Because since you already know the story and you're familiar with the characters, you can really focus on the language. You'll be able to notice little things that maybe you didn't catch the first time around. And honestly, it's just really fun to experience a story that you already love in a whole new way.
That's such a good idea. But it takes the pressure off, too, because you don't have to worry about understanding every single word.
Yeah.
You can just relax and enjoy the show while you're learning.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like when you look at one of your favorite paintings and you start to notice all these details that you never saw before.
I love that.
Wow.
This deep dive has been amazing. I feel like I've learned so much, and now I'm thinking of all the shows I want to go back and watch.
Me too. It's crazy how much we can learn from something as simple as watching TV or a movie.
I know, right? Well, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing all of your amazing tips with us.
Oh, of course. It was my pleasure.
And to all of our listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this journey into the world of learning English with movies and TV shows. Don't forget to subscribe to English with Narayana for even more tips and resources to help you on your English learning adventure.
And we'll be back next time with another deep dive into a different aspect of English learning.
So until then, happy watching and happy learning.